Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. President Biden's calling on Congress to ban assault weapons, expand background checks for gun buyers, and create new red flag laws that would prohibit some people from owning firearms. Biden made the call during a rare primetime address from the White House Thursday evening.
I support the bipartisan efforts that include a small group of Democrats and Republican senators trying to find a way. But my God, the fact that the majority of the Senate Republicans don't want any of these proposals even to be debated or come up for a vote, I find unconscionable.
Biden's remarks came on another day of deadly gun violence across the United States. In Iowa, a man shot and killed 2 women in the parking lot of a church north of Des Moines Thursday before turning the gun on himself. In Racine, Wisconsin, 5 people were wounded Thursday when shots were fired at a cemetery where mourners had gathered for a man killed by a police officer during a traffic stop last month. In Tulsa, Oklahoma, investigators have named the 4 people killed Wednesday after a gunman opened fire on a medical center before turning the gun on himself. Police say the shooter's primary target was Preston Phillips, an African-American surgeon who performed back surgery on the gunman less than 2 weeks ago. The shooter purchased the semi-automatic rifle used in the murder just 3 hours before he killed not only Dr. Preston, but another doctor, their receptionist, as well as a patient. The shooter also carried a semi-automatic pistol he'd bought just days before. The House Judiciary Committee voted along party lines Thursday to support a new package of gun controls. The legislation would raise the age at which people can purchase a semi-automatic firearm from 18 to 21. It would also regulate the storage of guns on residential properties while cracking down on illegal sales of guns and high-capacity magazines. The legislation likely faces a Republican filibuster in the Senate. This is Georgia Congressmember Lucy McBath, whose 17-year-old son, Jordan Davis, was murdered by a gunman in 2012.
Do we as a nation have the God-given right to live free from this scourge of gun violence, of senseless suffering, of death and despair? Because we cannot keep doing this. An entire generation of children are learning that the adults they look up to cannot or will not protect them. We all agree that the status quo is unacceptable. We all understand that the murder of our children cannot continue, and we have solutions that a majority of American people believe in.
Ohio's House of Representatives has passed a bill making it easier for teachers and school employees to bring guns into their classrooms. Ohio Republican Governor Mike DeWine has said he looks forward to signing House Bill 99, which would allow school employees to carry firearms after just 1 hour of training. Ohio Federation of Teachers Vice President Sherry Obrensky blasted the legislation during a state Senate hearing this week. She cited a parallel effort by Ohio Republicans to ban books from school libraries that deal with topics like race and LGBTQ+ rights.
Teachers aren't trusted to do curriculum. We aren't trusted with the books we choose, but somehow we're supposed to be trusted with a gun in school.
In Ukraine, thousands of people fled frontline towns in the eastern Donbas region as Russia's invasion enters its 100th day. Russian forces are seeking to push beyond Severodonetsk, where they have gained control of most of the eastern city. Meanwhile, Ukraine is pressing a counteroffensive in the southern Kherson region. On Thursday, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said Russia now controls about 20% of Ukraine's territory. Saudi Arabia said Thursday it'll boost oil production to offset fuel costs that have soared since Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The coalition of oil-producing nations, known as OPEC+, has agreed to Saudi plans to pump an additional 650,000 barrels per day in July and August. Meanwhile, the Washington Post reports President Biden will travel to Saudi Arabia later this month, where he will ask Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman to pump more oil. That's despite Biden's pledge during a 2019 debate to make Saudi Arabia a pariah for the state-sponsored killing of Washington Post columnist Jamal Khashoggi.
President Trump has not punished senior Saudi leaders. Would you?
Yes, and I said it at the time. Khashoggi was, in fact, murdered and dismembered, and I believe in the order of the Crown Prince. And I would make it very clear, we were not going to, in fact, sell more weapons to them. We were going to, in fact, make them pay the price and make them, in fact, the pariah that they are.
That was then candidate Joe Biden speaking at a presidential debate in 2019. Last year, President Biden approved a $650 million arms sale to Saudi Arabia. And earlier this year, Biden signed off on the sale of $5 billion of weapons to Jordan, the United Arab Emirates, and Saudi Arabia. Yemen's Houthi rebels have agreed to extend a ceasefire with a Saudi-led coalition by an additional 2 months. The warring parties first agreed to a truce during the holy month of Ramadan in April. This week, 48 U.S. Congress members introduced a war powers resolution calling on the Biden administration to end U.S. military support and arms sales to the Saudi-led coalition attacking Yemen. In a statement, Congressional Progressive Caucus Chair Pramila Jayapal said, there are more than 16 million Yemenis living on the brink of starvation and more than 2 million children suffering from acute malnutrition. And the American people's tax dollars are helping finance that suffering, Congressmember Jayapal wrote. In the occupied West Bank, Israeli forces have killed at least 4 Palestinians in 2 days. One of the victims was 17-year-old Odeh Sadaka, who was shot in the chest Thursday. This is an eyewitness.
When he was killed, he was with other young men near the barrier. They were not close to the barrier and not near the danger area. They were near homes in the village. They shot him. The bullet was shot towards his heart. Also, they fired towards the other boys who were with him. They ran away. They couldn't help him.
In Mexico, immigrant justice advocates held a funeral Thursday for 2 Haitian asylum seekers who died in Tijuana after they were blocked from entering the U.S. and forced to wait in the Mexican border city in dangerous conditions. 34-year-old Jocelyn Anselme was murdered, while 30-year-old Caleria Assange suffered a heart attack and died after advocates say he was denied adequate medical care. The Haitian Bridge Alliance and other groups blamed their deaths on the Biden administration's enforcement of Title 42, the Trump-era pandemic policy that allows U.S. authorities to expel asylum seekers at the southern border without due process. Over 2 million people have been blocked from applying for asylum in the U.S. since March 2020 in violation of international law. The House committee investigating the January 6th Capitol insurrection has scheduled its first public hearing next week. The prime-time hearing is set for 8 p.m. Eastern Time next Thursday, June 9th. We'll be streaming the hearing live at democracynow.org. Press freedom groups are demanding justice for Ricardo Avila, a 25-year-old camera operator and TV host killed in southwest Honduras. Local outlets report Avila was shot in the head last week while he rode his bicycle. He was then taken to a hospital in the capital, Tegucigalpa, where he died of his wounds Sunday. Avila covered social movements and protests against his destructive economic project known as ZETES, which was aimed at attracting foreign investment in Honduras. Avila's colleagues say he was killed in retaliation for reporting on these issues. In El Salvador, at least 18 people have been killed in the custody of law enforcement since a state of emergency was imposed in late March in response to rising homicides attributed to gangs. That's according to the Central American human rights group Cristasal. Amnesty International is accusing the government of Salvador and President Nayib Bukele of serious violations. This is Erica Guevara Rosas, America's director at Amnesty International.
The situation in this country is critical. According to official figures, in a little over 2 months, 36,000 people, including children, who have been detained, mostly arbitrarily, whose deprivation of freedom is illegal, are facing criminal proceedings without the most basic judicial guarantees.
And prominent Sahrawi human rights activist Sultana Khaya has arrived safely in Spanish territory Wednesday, where she'll get medical treatment after more than than 500 days of house arrest with her family in Moroccan-occupied Western Sahara. Moroccan authorities have subjected Chaya to harassment, beatings, and sexual assault. They also contaminated her family's water supply, destroyed furniture and property, and cut off electricity to the home. On Wednesday, Sultana Chaya spoke to supporters who greeted her at her arrival at the airport in the Canary Islands.
I send a message to the Spanish state that if it supports the autonomy plan for Western Sahara, it is supporting the rape of women, torture, and illegal detention of the Sahrawi population. Tell the Spanish government that it has already abandoned us 50 years ago, and we have suffered these savages. We have continued to fight for our self-determination, and we are more than ready to continue to fight for our freedom.
You can see our documentary featuring Sultana Chaya, 4 Days in Western Sahara, Africa's Last Colony, at our website, democracynow.org. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.